Welcome back to the Panic Room, guys. So today we are talking about The Lost Village by Camilla Steen. This was a bit of a slow burn, but I'm really glad I stuck with it. You know, personal opinion, I think that isolation horror is really hard to do, especially nowadays. I usually find that it falls into one of two categories. Either it is done really, really well, and it gives the reader this sense of like cold, foreboding loneliness, or it's done poorly and it just ends up being silly and easily debunkable. And nowadays, where we're all so connected, I find it's even harder to do isolation horror. How many times have you seen a movie from 20 years ago where if the main protagonist was given a cell phone, there would be no movie? So a little bit of an overview about the book before we jump right into some spoilers. The book does take place in a village called Silverjarn, and I am very sorry if I'm butchering that or any of the other Swedish names in this book. I tried to do some Google Translate, but where they're all proper nouns, it didn't really do much. So Silverjarn's claim to fame is that about 60 years ago, almost 900 people, the entirety of the town, just vanished. And when I say vanished, I mean without a trace. Coffee cups left on tables, laundry left on the lawn. You get what I'm saying. So one of the really cool parts about this book is that we get two types of chapters. One is called Now, and one is called Then. The Now chapters deal with our present day protagonists, and those are Alice, Emmy, Tone, Robert, and Max. And they are making a documentary about Silverjarn, and each of them have their own reasons for being there, which I'll get into when we get into the spoilers. We also have the Then chapters, and that is actually taking place during the heyday of Silverjarn in the days leading up to the disappearances. And our main voice from that time period is Elsa. Yes, I thought it too. And her family. Her daughter, Margarita, is actually in Stockholm. She's 18 at the time and has moved to Stockholm with her husband and soon-to-be baby because she's pregnant. And so she is not in Silverjarn when the disappearances happen. But Elsa, her husband, and her little daughter, Anna, A-I-N-A. I don't know how else to say it. Blame Disney. They're all there, and we get Elsa's perspective of the events that lead up to the disappearances, which is really cool because we're getting these two simultaneous storylines happening, and you start to see how they merge as the story goes on, which I thought was really neat. So jumping into some of the book and some spoilers, just to let you know, I do want to put a trigger warning here. There is some talk about self-harm and some talk about some abuse. So if those are things that get to you, perhaps, that might be something to think about before you pick this book up. So I'll start with our main characters in present day. We have Alice, who is the main driving force behind this documentary, and you find out that the reason for that is that her grandmother was actually Margarita, the older daughter of Elsa, who had moved to Stockholm. And as such, she lost her mother, her father, and her little sister in the disappearances. And ever since telling this story to Alice, Alice has just been obsessed. And she has done all sorts of research, as has her grandmother, and to try to find out, what happened to these people. And you get this idea from Alice that she has these, ideas of grandeur. She went to film school and she has wanted to make this documentary for years, so this is really her baby. We also meet Tone. Tone is Alice's friend, and you find out, right off that Tone and Alice sort of have a connection that none of the other ones know about. And you find out over the course of the book that there actually was one person recovered after the disappearances from Silverjarn, and that was an infant that they had discovered in the nursing ward. And it just so happens that Tone is the daughter of this infant. Alice has discovered that the infant was adopted, she tracked him down, and that's why Tone is here. You also find out that Tone has some psychological issues. She is actually on some psychotropic medication at the time. We also have Emmy. Emmy's an interesting character. Emmy is Alice's ex-best friend. And you have to wonder, well, if they're enemies and ex-best friends, why is she here? Well, it's pretty much given the reason that the whole reason Emmy is even there is because Alice has very little money and she needed somebody that could do the job but kind of do it for the cheap. So Emmy was a last resort. And again, over the course of the novel, you find that Emmy and Alice have a very very deep history. They used to be best friends, but that Alice was suffering from some mental health issues and some depression at the time, and actually tried to take her own life. And Emmy just couldn't handle it. On the day that Alice decided to take her life, Emmy just said, I can't do this anymore. Thankfully, Alice didn't go through with it, but it did definitely drive a wedge between them. So we have that baggage going into this. We also have two men, Robert, who it's never came out and said, but it seems like he is Emmy's boyfriend. Again, that's never really said straight out, but that's the gist I got. We also have Max. Max is a backer for this documentary. He is one of the investors. So a little backstory about our characters from the 1950s. I already mentioned Elsa. She is Alice's great-grandmother, and her husband, Stefan. They also have a younger daughter, Anna, and Anna appears to be maybe 16, I think, at this time. At least that's the gist I got. Another main character is a charge of Elsa's named Brigitte. Brigitte was sort of put under Elsa's care when her birth mother died, and she is, for me, I'm picturing her as like late 20s, early 30s. She is developmentally delayed, and as such is kind of not understood by many other people in this very isolated town. But Elsa takes care of her. She is able to spend a few hours on her own. However, Elsa does have to bring her meals, make sure she's clean, things like that. And for me, Brigitte was described as being, developmentally delayed, with the mind of a child. However, she does exhibit some maybe autistic characteristics of, acting out, and she was nonverbal, but that's just my opinion. So jumping into the story, we see our main characters pull up into the village. They sort of make their camp, and they only have 5 days. So Alice is kind of raring to get out here and do some field work. So they start to, walk around. Her and Tone actually take the school. The village is very self-contained because of how isolated they were. So they take the school, and they make the really dumb decision to walk up a set of stairs. And almost immediately, Tone crashes through and hurts her ankle. And it's a pretty bad injury, too. And it's described as, over the course of the next few hours, becoming very red, very inflamed. And Tone has a very standoffish attitude when offered even the bare minimum of pain medication, like Advil. And you find out that it's because she's afraid that it's going to interfere with her psychotropic medication that she's on. But nobody else knows about her history, and she wants to keep it that way. Alice is the only one that even knows why Tone doesn't want to take the medication and why Tone is there. So she keeps kind of like pushing everyone like, no, she's fine, she's fine. Her and Emmy start to have this clash. Emmy thinks that they need to scrap it and take her to the hospital, which is probably true. But, Alice actually does come out and half-heartedly ask Tone if she wants to go, but from our privileged reader perspective, we know that Tone says no because she wants to be a good friend to Alice, and she knows this documentary is Alice's baby. So we see Tone getting worse and worse. We see a sprinkle of some paranormal activity start to happen. Some of our characters are seeing figures. We are hearing weird things over walkie-talkies, things like that. The whole reason why they don't get signal or that the walkie-talkies are kind of glitchy is because, or it's explained, that there is ore in the mines and it's interfering with the signal. I don't know how true that is, but it lends itself to the story, right? So we see Tone start to become more and more delirious. We're thinking like, okay, she's becoming feverish. She definitely needs a doctor. This is really driven home when they find Brigitte's hut, and they see that Brigitte has a bunch of like pictures and stuff on her table that she's drawn, and Tone sort of zones out and starts to like move her fingers around them. So I'm thinking at this point, like, do we have some possession issues going on here? So the following day, Tone is just way too bad. So Emmy offers to stay back at the camp with her while everyone else goes out. Well, when everyone comes back to the camp at the end of the day, Emmy's gone, and so is Tone, and one of the vans. So they all immediately think, okay, Emmy took it upon herself to take Tone to the hospital. But while they're all standing around getting angry, here comes Emmy bouncing back up the one and only road in and out of this village. She hops out, Alice immediately starts to accost her, and Emmy's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So Alice gets very upset, and she decides that they need to go out and try to find her. Everything has came out at this point about about Tone's background, her psychological issues, things like that. So they all kind of fan out and go out to try and find her in the village. While they're gone, they hear this giant explosion, and they all come running back to camp. And all of their stuff has been blown up. Both of the vans, the car, everything. So they're immediately blaming Tone for this. Alice tries to stick up for her and say, Tone wouldn't do this. But of course, we're thinking along with the other characters, she doesn't know that. If she's having a psychological episode, you don't know what she's capable of. So there's a little bit more paranormal activity happening where, a lot of the characters think that they hear laughter and, different things like that. But it's all very much glossed over. Simultaneously with this, we see that Elsa is starting to face a little bit more opposition with her daughter and with some of the people in the town. This priest has kind of put everybody under his spell and started to make them kind of turn on Brigida and think that she's evil, which we see a lot of in history when they don't understand something. Obviously, it's evil, right? So coming back to our present day, now our characters are truly isolated. They have no food, no water, nothing. Thankfully, there is a mountain stream nearby so they can get water. So they decide that they need to try to hole up in the church and just wait it out because, Emmy told her mom 2 days, call the cops. So they think, all right, well, we just need to wait for them. So while they're in the church, Alice finds some of the hot priest's sermons and you find out he was very much fire and brimstone. I got a lot of Jim Jones vibes from him. But the next morning, they have footprints outside of the chapel, and they think, oh, it's Tone. She was trying to get in. So they do eventually find Tone, and she is acting, again, privileged reader perspective, she is acting very much like Brigida. She is nonverbal at this point. She is just filthy, has no kind of self-awareness really at this point going on. She's fighting like a wild animal. She doesn't want to be touched. But they get her and they end up taking her back to Alice's grandmother's old house because one of the bedrooms upstairs has a lock in it. And they find some honey and some sardines and I guess they eat them. I mean, you do what you gotta do, I guess. So they lock her upstairs in the room and they think that she's going to be safe, but they keep hearing all these weird things coming over the walkie-talkies. So they decide they're going to go back to the school and they think, well, maybe when Tone fell, she dropped her walkie-talkie and that's all it is. So they all go back to the school and they make the really dumb decision again to go up the steps, the very same ones that Tone crashed through. So of course they collapse. Both of the men and Alice actually fall all the way through, whereas Emmy, because she was in the head of all of them, she makes a leap and makes it onto the second floor. And so she calls down to them, because they all survive, that she thinks she's broken some ribs. So they all decide that they need to get to the second floor and get to her. So they run around the back and they find a fire escape. Alice, being the lightest of the three of them, decides she needs to be the one to go up there. So for a timeline, not even 20 minutes or so has passed from the time that Emmy said, I think I broke my ribs, to the time that Alice is starting up the fire escape. So she gets all the way up there and discovers Emmy's dead. So here come the guys rolling up the fire escape. Thankfully it holds. So Robert is distraught. He goes off into a classroom by himself to grieve. And so Max and Alice decide that they're going to give Emmy a little bit of dignity and try to find a sheet to cover her with, rearrange her, close her eyes, things like that. Well, Max discovers while he's doing this that she has some bruising around her neck and that her eyes are bloodshot. And they come to the conclusion that she was strangled. Well, they can't blame Tone this time. So now we're starting to see our characters give a little bit more credence to the possibility of a paranormal reason. So while Max and Alice are discussing this whole paranormal possibility, it dawns on them that Robert is by himself. So they go hightailing it over there. Sure enough, he's been paranormaled, strangled, the whole 9 yards. So they're freaking out. They decide that they need to get back down the fire escape and get to the house. And again, I think they're kind of just expecting to wait it out. There's talk about trying to walk to the nearest gas station, but it's something like 40 miles away. It's crazy. So they get back there and, they get a little bit of water. They decide they need to take something up to Tone. They open up the door and Tone is not alone. There's a little old woman in there holding a knife to her neck. And so Alice doesn't know what to think, but the little old woman starts to just ramble. And Alice, because she has all this knowledge of her family from back in the day, she realizes that this little old woman is Anna. My mind was blown. Have you read this? What did you think? Because I had no idea who this woman would be. None. So going back to our past time, checking in with Elsa, we see that things are getting really, really heated. And she discovers that, they've just got to get out. The mine is closed. She needs to go to Stockholm with her oldest daughter and get her family out of Silverjarn, because everybody is just under the priest's spell at this point. And she's worried that her daughter's not going to want to go. But she knows she has to take Birgitta with her. Well, she's writing this letter to her daughter about the time that one of her friends shows up and says, you got to come to Birgitta's hut, something's wrong. So she goes to Birgitta's hut, only to find her doubled over in pain, and discovers that she's in labor. Disgusting, right? So she gets her to the nurse, and they deliver the baby, and you guessed it, this is the infant that was found after everyone disappeared. So Elsa realizes that she's got to get the two of them out of here. Birgitta and this infant, who they named Christina, have got to get on the next train. So she makes all these plans, that she'll just come back for her daughter and her husband. She's got to get them out of here. Her plans are foiled, though. The priest actually knows what's happening, and it's alluded to that this is his baby. I'll say it again. Disgusting. So let's jump back to present day. A little old woman, Anna, is calling Tone a witch, and that she knew she would come back, and that she's going to take him to the church. Of course, we think this is just the ramblings of a madwoman. How the hell did this even happen? Where has Anna been all these years, right? What has she eaten? So Anna tells them they're going to come with her, and she goes traipsing off into the forest, saying that if they try to run, that she's going to kill Tone. So they get into the forest, and they find this big hole in the ground, right? Now let's jump back to the past for a second. Elsa gets busted by this church. They're holding her, saying she needs to come back to God, and that Birgitta is the devil and all this. And at this point, she kind of gets dragged into the middle of the town square and sees Birgitta bound to a pole. And she watches as the town stones Birgitta to death. I mean, how tragic, right? And she has no idea what has happened to the infant. She's afraid that it's going to fall into the hands of this mad priest, but she doesn't really have a whole lot of time to worry about it, because they're leading her off into the forest, and she comes to the same mining hole that our present day characters are. So we have this convergence of our stories now. So in the past, we see that Elsa is taken down into this big open cavern, and how this priest has told everyone that this is going to be his church, that, down here he is God. Well, you find out that one of the reasons that the mine closed, if you remember me mentioning that, because that was one of the reasons Elsa wanted to leave, is because it was unstable. So while they're all down there listening to the ravings of this mad Jim Jones-esque character, everything kind of just crumbles and kills everybody in the town. They're all dead. Which I have to wonder, why didn't somebody think to check in the mine? When the authorities came, but, whatever. So jumping back to present, Anna forces them all down, saying that they're going to go see her church. And you find out that Anna was actually tasked, when the church collapsed in the past and killed everybody in the town, Anna was with the infants, because the priest, the crazy priest, had sent her up there to watch it, to make sure that it was okay. So that sort of gives us a little bit more confirmation that this was his child. So Anna now feels guilty that she wasn't there with the rest of her church, and he told her to hang out and watch. So that's what she's been doing for 60 years. So she leads everybody down there, and Alice starts to hear people singing, chorus, church chorus. And so you have to wonder, is this just Alice, or is this actually a haunted place, right? And it's kind of left a little bit ambiguous, which I like. I think it gives us, the reader, the chance to make it up for ourselves, So they get down there. Anna thinks that she has to kill Tone because Birgitta is the one that is inside of her, and she's a witch, and she's the reason her church got killed, and all this, and just the ravings of a mad woman. They have a scuffle, they have a fight, and they end up getting the better of her. Anna is dead, and she kind of gets washed down into the mine so that she can be with the rest of her church. And you sort of see how Alice can still hear them singing, which I thought was really creepy and really cool. So they get out, they get away, and they kind of just revert back to their original plan to wait it out and wait for the authorities to show up. And the book sort of ends with the two of them noticing a bird land above them, and how that was the first sign of life that they had seen since they gotten there. Which, for me, it was almost like, is this a symbol of, everything being at peace in the town now that Anna has joined her congregation? Which kind of lends me to think that maybe it wasn't a paranormal, maybe it was just the misdeeds of a town that had kind of not been laid to rest yet, Or maybe it was ghosts. The last little bit of the book, we kind of see a little glimpse into Anna about how, the priest charged her with waiting and how she just waited. And, that she knew she shouldn't have let that baby go with the authorities, but, she was tasked with taking care of it, and she just wanted her church back. And it's sort of like this unraveling of her mind, and we kind of see, like, why she stood around and waited, and how, she ate out of all of her neighbors' pantries to stay alive. Which still doesn't answer the question to me about how she survived that long, because there's no way all of that food, even if she ate in every one of her neighbors' houses, would have lasted her 60 years. So guys, that's it. I'm sorry if this video was a little long. There's a lot to get through in this book, but I highly recommend it. If you like isolation horror, if you were a fan of Blair Witch, The Village by M. Night Shyamalan, any of those movies, then I think you would love this. It really does isolation horror very, very well. And like I said, I really think that the back and forth and the two double storylines added a lot to this book. So, thank you for coming to the Panic Room for our book review. Please like and subscribe. It would really help me out. And comment down below. Let me know. Did you read The Lost Village? Do you want to read The Lost Village? What do you think about isolation horror? I want to know. So guys, thank you so much, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.